So that's Blockbuster story. That's the hot discussion topic in wrestling, number one. Number two, of course, and how can I forget this, is TNA being canceled by Spike TV. Of course, at this point, it's just gospel, it's just rumor, no truth to it at this point in time. There's a lot of different contradicting reports from Viacom, the parent company of Spike TV, people from Spike TV, from Dixie Carter, the head of Impact, the head of TNA Wrestling, from Bob Ryder, who was an official in TNA. A lot of contradicting reports. I know TMZ put up a report on Sunday night, or even before that, there was a news report broken on WrestlingWorld.com. I can't remember the source exactly, but there was a rumor going around from a credible wrestling site that broke the news that Impact Wrestling had been canceled by Spike TV after the ongoing negotiations had not gotten anywhere. And then TMZ broke a story a short while later saying they had been canned by Spike TV, they could not come to terms on a deal, and that they have until October to find a new network home. So like I said before, Dixie Carter went into Twitter on Monday, as did a few people from TNA, as did Viacom. Viacom didn't directly discuss the negotiations, or they did not confirm nor deny the rumor of Impact being canned by Spike TV, since they can't comment on ongoing negotiations between them and whoever the owner of the show is, whatever. But that being said, though, so there's a lot of contradicting reports. There's no truth as of right now. But if there is truth to this, if it is indeed true, and it's slowly looking like it is, and that Spike TV does not want to re-sign with Impact, then it does suck for TNA. I'm not going to jump to conclusions and just overreact and saying that TNA is going out of business. And here's the thing, too. There's a couple of, there's a couple of ways that you can look at this. And I said this on Twitter on Sunday night. You can go back and check out the tweets. And speaking of Twitter from Sunday night, a lot of people were tweeting some pretty hilarious stuff when it comes to the closing, so to speak, of TNA and the imminent doom of the company and where they're going and if they're going out of business and if they would be signed to the History Channel or Disney Channel. A lot of hilarious stuff from people on Twitter on Sunday night. That was probably the highlight of this entire this story regarding TNA. And Impact was even trending worldwide on Sunday night. Impact Wrestling was trending worldwide for the first time in forever, if ever, to my memory anyway. But anyway, I personally, I've said this before and I'll say it again, as much as I've criticized TNA in the past, as well as many people have, and rightfully so, they've done a lot of stupid shit over the years, most notably, since the Hogan era in 2010, they've done a lot of stupid shit. Like I said, they deserve all the hate they get sometimes not rightfully so, a lot of the times rightfully so. But there's a reason why I continue to watch TNA. There's a reason why I continue to watch the product. I've been watching weekly for the most part. There was at one point from 2009 to 2010 that I could not watch weekly. And I just kind of tuned into the pay-per-view results. I would look it up sometimes. And it's just funny thinking back on it now, because nowadays I would never do that. But anyway, though, I've been watching TNA religiously for the most part over the last 6 years. I like a lot of the talent there, and the biggest part coming out of this is that I just simply don't want to see anyone out of a job. You can't assume that if TNA was to go out of business, that WWE would sign half these people, if any of these people. Let's be realistic here. If people are hoping that TNA should go out of business, so the top guys like a Bobby Roode or a Jeff Hardy or a Kurt Angle, I could see Kurt Angle going back. He's been very vocal about going back to the WWE, so I could see him going back, regardless of whether TNA goes out of business or not. His contract expires in September, and once that contract expires, it's looking likely that he will be leaving. It's not confirmed yet. He still hasn't made up his decision, according to his interview on Jim Ross's podcast from a few weeks ago. But that being said, though, I could very easily see him going. But anyway, though, most of the great talent that I love watching in TNA every single week that I tune in for, and it's not just because of these people, but they are the biggest highlights from the show, and if they weren't on, then I would be less inclined to watch, but I do have to review the show every week, so I do kind of have a reason to watch each week. But anyway, people like in Austin Aries, like a James Storm, like a Bobby Roode, even a fan of Jeff Hardy am I tune into the show every week for these people. And to not see them on TV every week would suck. And that they would get lost in the indie scene and stuff like that. They're too talented to be on the indie scene. You could say the same thing about an AJ Styles, and I really wish that he could have stayed with TNA, but if he wasn't going to be treated right by them, if he wasn't going to be paid the amount of money that he was looking for, then he had every right to leave. So I don't blame him for that. But if you think for 2 seconds that TNA going out of business means that most of the roster, all these talented guys, are going to be jumping ship to WWE, you're out of your mind. If WWE didn't even take a second glance at AJ Styles, didn't contact him about coming into their company, then there's not a chance at all, not a chance in hell, Mr. McMahon's theme song here, just quoting that, that they would take a look at a guy like Rude or James Storm, especially if most of those guys are in their 30s or late 30s. Someone asked me on my YouTube show, #AskGSM the other day, Jared, shout out to him, great guy, that if AJ Styles or Christopher Daniels or Steve Corino, even from ROH, if any of those guys should be signed by WWE for one last run. And the truth of the matter is that they wouldn't be. WWE is not interested, for the most part. I know they signed Prince Devitt and Kenta and stuff like that, but that gets them a lot of international exposure. So that's mostly the reason why they signed them, in addition to the fact they're, pretty damn good. But that aside, though, they're not looking for, established guys outside of their company, especially that someone that has that TNA stench that lasts 10 years for someone like a Styles or a Daniels or a Rude or a Storm. They're looked at as TNA guys for the most part, and WWE wants nothing to do with them. They are more focused than ever on building up their own talent via the Performance Center, and they've been doing that. They would much rather take a football player who has no wrestling background whatsoever, has no knowledge of the product whatsoever, and build them up to be a future star, a future John Cena in the company, rather than take a look at someone like an AJ Styles or a Samoa Joe, or a Bobby Roode, people that have been successful elsewhere. They wouldn't take a second glance at those people because they want to weed out the indie guys, so to speak. That might be one of the reasons why they didn't sign the Wolves, or the Pit Bulls, or whatever they called them on the episode of NXT back in late 2013. And they're the current World Tag Team Champions in TNA now, which is kind of funny to think about. But that being said, though, I don't want to see TNA go out of business. If anything, for years now, I've been very low, so to speak, I guess, on Spike TV. I've never been an avid viewer of the network. Maybe I'm biased because I love the USA Network so much, and I was happy to see that USA had signed with WWE once again. They had re-signed their television deal earlier this year. I know the stock plummeted and all that bullshit, and they had to go through budget cuts, and they couldn't triple their TV deal. But I was glad they stayed with USA because they're such a great network, or NBC or whatever. I think USA is great, so I'm glad that Raw is staying there. Spike TV, on the other hand, they haven't had great programming in years. So I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan of tuning into Impact Wrestling and with lead-ins of cops and cops afterwards. It's just, what does that network have aside from cops? Maybe some people like it. Just my personal opinion, I'm just not a fan of Spike TV. So I, for one, am glad that Spike TV is canning Impact Wrestling, if only because Impact Wrestling could get better promotion elsewhere. What the hell has Spike TV done for TNA? This is not all Spike TV's fault. I know TNA has no product awareness whatsoever, and they're terrible at that. They had Hulk Hogan in their fucking hands, and they didn't use the guy to their best of their ability. This is Hulk Hogan, one of the biggest, if not the biggest name in wrestling today, if ever. I mean, the wrestling industry. And he did nothing to promote the company that he worked for 3.5 years. And that's ridiculous. So with that being said, though, it's not all Spike TV's fault, but it is part of their fault. Because you would watch Impact, for people like me that would watch it every week, you would see a Mike Tenay promoting the shit out of Bellator, all the crap that's coming up on their network next. They would promote the shit out of all the MMA shows that they have on Spike TV, which is great. I love MMA. I'm a big UFC fan, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if TNA is going to help Spike promote all this shit on their network, the least Spike could do is promote TNA in return. So here is hoping that they are indeed done with Spike TV, but I'm not saying in that they should go out of business. I'm saying that in the sense that they should re-sign with another network. What network that is, I have no idea. But Impact Wrestling does a steady 1 million viewers every single week. Say what you will about the product, but the ratings, for the most part, over the last 5-10 years, have stayed pretty steady. I know maybe at one point they might have been higher. I understand that. Maybe they drop 0.00 of a point every year. I don't give a flying shit. I don't give a flying fuck, to be quite honest with you. I'm just saying that, for the most part, keyword there, their ratings have stayed consistent over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So with that being said, I could definitely see a lesser-known network picking them up. Whatever it is, I know TNA might have to go through some budget cuts and whatever else. Do whatever you have to do to maintain a presence on television. I would hate to see a lot of guys go out of business and see my favorite wrestlers, people like an Austin Aries or a Bobby Roode or a James Storm, have to wrestle on the indies, because I know for almost a fact they would not be looked at by WWE at all. WWE, they have enough people already as it is that they aren't doing anything with. A Bobby Roode or an Austin Aries, if they were to be signed, they'd be frickin' jobbing on superstars if they were even going to make it to the roster. They would spend 10 years in NXT before they were ever called up. And at the age that they're at, in their mid-30s, late 30s, it's too late. It sucks, but it's the honest-to-God truth. And the final point that I want to make on this discussion, would WWE buy out TNA? I highly doubt it. A lot of people were commenting that. Jokingly, I understand that. But for people that were seriously considering WWE purchasing TNA, why would Vince McMahon care? They have never seen TNA as a competitor. At least WCW for quite a while was a second-tier company, if not better than WWE, surpassing them in ratings and stuff like that for a number of years in the late 90s during the Monday Night Wars. So for them to purchase WCW was a big freaking deal. Not enough people watch TNA nowadays, if ever. I mean, TNA doesn't have enough awareness in the eyes of the wrestling fans to be considered a big deal by WWE. Like I said before, they've never been considered a competitor, just an alternative. And that's the key word there. I've been saying this forever, but TNA should strive to be an alternative to WWE, strive to be different, and they've successfully done that in recent weeks with their recent episodes of Impact in New York. It may have proved them in too little too late, but I, for one, have enjoyed the New York tapings that TNA has put on over the last few weeks, and I look forward to Destination X on Thursday, which looks to be great as well. But that being said, though, WWE buying out TNA is just a mind-boggling thought. Will it ever happen? I'm not going to rule it out. I'm not going to say it's completely out of the question. I just don't see it happening, to be quite honest with you. The only reason, and I know there were rumors of this happening today, or of the possibility of it happening, the only reason WWE would ever consider buying out TNA is for their video library, especially with the network now. They might want to consider adding that stuff to the library. I've seen a lot of people say, coming from both sides, that it would be a great thing for the network, or it would lead to DVD sales. If they purchase a TNA video library and they put out a DVD on TNA, it wouldn't sell any fucking views whatsoever. It might sell a few people that currently watch TNA, but aside from that, it's not going to do big business. It's not WCW. WWE still sells WCW DVDs to this day, 15 years after they went out of business, and the WCW DVDs are sometimes selling even better than the WWE DVDs. So that says a lot about WCW, despite the fact how much they buried WCW and how quote-unquote terrible it was, and it was at times in its later years, how terrible it was during its existence. But that being said, though, I mean, it might lead to some increase in subscribers for the network, but for the most part, there's not enough footage from TNA, not a lot of classic footage that WWE, it's worth buying. They might have some good stuff in the early years, especially for someone like a Sting, who is coming on, who is more than likely on board. I'm 99% confident about that. That Sting is on board with WWE. I mean, I know he was at Comic-Con. He's got his own merchandise. He's in the video game, stuff like that. But that being said, though, what was I getting at here? Oh, yeah, they might purchase the TNA video library, if anything, for footage of Sting, or maybe for someone like a Kurt Angle. Maybe, but otherwise, I mean, stuff from the last few years, why the hell would they give that a second glance? There's nothing from the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years that is really anything all that good. All the best TNA footage is from their first few years, because everything in the last 5 years or so has been complete shit, especially during the Hogan era. So no one would have any interest in purchasing that. Maybe some stuff from the early careers of Sting and Angle and some people that have passed through TNA, but WWE hasn't even bothered to ever mention TNA on their product, so why would they consider buying out their video library if they've taught their fans to completely ignore that company for oh so many years? You know what I mean? So that's the only reason I would see I could see WWE buying TNA, if only for their video library, and I don't even see that as a big possibility. But anyway, those are my thoughts on TNA being canned by Spike TV. Here's hoping we can get some more facts regarding this story within the next couple of weeks. But in my personal opinion, best of luck to TNA in finding a new home or a new network for Impact Wrestling.